The reason is, on the one hand, Israel's long-standing interest in reducing the power of Iran in the region so that, Iran would not become a challenge to the Israeli state. Whether willingly or unwillingly, the GCC countries are brought into the war because of their long-standing, ties with the United States. If at all this war has to stop, some of these Gulf countries have to really put tremendous pressure on the United States, isn't it? If there is no cost for them, they won't do that. But that's not an evidence of Shia-Sunni conflict becoming much more, intensifying or anything of that sort. The Indian government, in a way, abdicating its responsibility to condemn the unilateral attack on a country like Iran. That's mainly because there are no country in the region that do not have an American base, except for Iran. Yeah, just yesterday evening, I tried to contact one of my colleagues in the university, and they were describing the dire situation that is happening because of this carpet bombing, as you said. And she told me that they are destroying our country through this, conduct of this war from the United States and Israel.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Timeline Conversations. Today, in this special episode on West Asia, we have with us Professor AK Ramakrishnan. Welcome to Timeline Conversation, Professor AK Ramakrishnan.
Thank you for addressing your audience.
This is the second time Professor Ramakrishnan is joining us on Timeline Conversation. Professor Ramakrishnan was earlier associated with the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Jamia Millia Islamia, and also MG University in Kerala. Professor Ramakrishnan, we'll start with some basic questions on the ongoing conflict in West Asia. Why Israel and US went on to attack Iran at this point of time?
Yeah, the narrative that is provided by the United States is that Iran is developing nuclear weapons, and that Iran was in a position to attack Israel and US bases. So this is a kind of preemptive strike. That is their argument. But those reasons that they provided do not stand the test of any scrutiny, because it almost seems like the old lie they have told to the world during the, as a reason for the invasion of Iraq. The whole point was that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and that has to be eliminated. That was the reason provided. People at that time knew that this is a lie, and it was proved to be a lie after the war. Nothing was found in Iraq. Similarly, this whole notion of Iran having the weapons capability is something that anybody who is looking at Iran's nuclear development knows that it has not reached that level of enrichment, and Iran was not going to have that capability anytime soon. They also have their own, policy of not using a nuclear bomb. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's own fatwa, for that matter, is very significant in this matter. So basically, that's not the reason. The reason is, on the one hand, Israel's long-standing interest in reducing the power of Iran in the region so that, Iran would not become a challenge to the Israeli state. Iran developing its nuclear program in itself was opposed by Israel from the very beginning, and Israel wanted this regime to go out. That regime change agenda was also part of its regional interest. The United States again has long-term grudge against Iran. After the Iranian Revolution, the United States lost much of its hold with respect to Iran because the closeness between the Shah of Iran and the United States was well known, and the end of the Shah's regime was also the end of much of the American hold in the Gulf region. So both of them consider Iran as their enemies, and then they really want to cripple the power of Iran, because Iran is the only country which is capable of projecting itself as a kind of regional power, particularly in the Gulf region.
While participating in another discussion this week, you were asked about GCCs, what the other GCC countries are going to do in this entire war, and whether are they going to join the war in full-fledged manner. And you said that they are already in the war, they are already in arms with Israel and US. Could you please elaborate that thing? Because everyone is thinking right now is that the war is between Iran and Israel-US campaign.
That point which was raised before the war, you now understand that what I meant. Now the Gulf countries are brought into that war, isn't it? That's mainly because there are no country in the region that do not have an American base, except for Iran. And if those territories are utilized by the Americans to attack Iran, obviously, those countries will also be targeted. Isn't Iran gave that warning prior to the war itself, because you should not allow your territory to attack us. But much of the attack by Iran was mainly to the American bases in these countries, and in some cases searching for American personnel in certain places, in the hotel and other places, as you know. So whether willingly or unwillingly, the GCC countries are brought into the war because of their long-standing ties with the United States, having those bases. And in a general sense, the GCC countries were, in spite of their internal differences, etc., they have been depending upon the American security umbrella for their protection for long. Even though Saudi Arabia and the United States had some problems after the September 11, 2001 incidents, but still, until now, that security linkage with the United States and its presence in the region is still important for these Gulf countries. Some of these Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia, tried to break from that to an extent, not completely avoid the American, the dependence as such, but at least have some other mechanisms. So they were very, establishing close friendship with China, for example. Some negotiations on the security side with India, and so on and so forth. So they wanted to diversify the sources of security for them. But still that dominance of the American security with that umbrella within the region for these monarchies are important.
Day before yesterday, when there was this Senate hearing on the war, and that was a classified hearing which was going on, and after the meeting, journalists asked Lindsey Graham, one of the senators from US, about the attack, and he replied that Iran, which is a Shia country, is attacking all the other countries around Iran because they want to bring Shiaism to other Sunni countries, and they want to establish Shia countries in the neighboring countries. How much this sectarian ideas into play in the current conflict?
That's not a major element in this conflict. You know, Lindsey Graham's role is very interesting in this case. He was the person who visited Saudi Arabia and reported back to Trump that Saudi Arabia supports our endeavors in Iran. So Saudi Arabia says that that's not what we told him. It's his making. So he was one of the major sources for Trump, to see that Saudi Arabia is with them in this case. And Iran also came to know about such things. So that was the background. So he played a major role in creating this kind of a big problem between Iran and Saudi Arabia. But in general, it is not that the Shia-Sunni factor does not play any role, but it has always been there. But that's not the major aspect of the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. For example, under Khatami's presidency in Iran, there were many attempts at making good relationship with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries also. There were mutual visits and so on. But there were problems, the killing of Nimr al-Nimr, the famous Shia cleric in eastern Saudi Arabia, was a problem. Then there was attack on Saudi embassy in Tehran. After that, and diplomatic relations were affected through such developments. But later, in 2023, March 2023, you had the Iran-Saudi deal, the agreement between the two under China's mediation in Beijing. It was a major agreement, as you know. And according to that agreement, they re-established the embassies in their respective capitals, in the other's capital. And, some process of making that relationship much smoother was going on. And it was in that context that you see a problem like this coming up. External intervention in Iran, challenging breaking the sovereignty of Iran by the United States and Israel coming. And other Gulf countries, therefore, because of their traditional relationship with the United States, caught up in this. You already had some of the Gulf countries already in the ambit of the so-called Abraham Accords with Israel and so on. So,
Yes.
there are all the more reasons for Iran to be very skeptical of the Gulf countries as well.
Since you mentioned Abraham Accord, does that deal have anything to play in this, the entire Iran attacking all the neighbors? Even they attacked Oman. They were engaged in the negotiation, but they attacked Oman as well.
Iran claims that attack in Oman is mainly on particular American targets rather than an attack on Oman. Oman was not severely affected by Iranian attacks. It's the other countries in the region, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and UAE. They are mostly affected by the whole thing. Iran wanted to make it, a regional issue because if at all this war has to stop, some of these Gulf countries have to really put tremendous pressure on the United States, isn't it? If there is no cost for them, they won't do that. they were claiming that they were trying to avoid the conflict, but it started anyhow. So now it's in their interest to make the United States come to a ceasefire as early as possible.
Again, the question of the Shia versus Sunni. When Khomeini was killed, then there were lots of protests across the world. But I noticed two important protests. One which was in Bahrain, and another was in which is currently going on in Iraq as well. Like Naziria, places like Naziria seen larger, bigger crowds, and they were bigger than what we normally see. With the current conflict and also what is going to come, do you see any groupings which is going to be formed or extended among the Shia countries?
In most of these countries that you have mentioned, Iraq, Bahrain, they are all Shia majority countries, as you know. Shias across the world, in Pakistan you had demonstrations, even in India we had demonstrations by the Shia community. Many countries it is there because the Shias feel that one of their religious leaders, the Ayatollah and the supreme leader of Iran, is assassinated. And therefore, according to that Shia tradition of martyrdom of Hussein, that memory, that works whenever an important religious leader is killed. And commemoration of that Husseini tradition is very important. And when Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed, that kind of sentiment was expressed by the Shia community. That is not a sentiment expressed against Sunni Muslims. It is a sentiment expressed by commemorating, the Ayatollah's life and religious leadership. It is also, in a way, an expression of solidarity with Iran in that sense, because it was facing the crisis. Its leader is being killed, and so on. So Shia communities are really affected by this killing. But that's not an evidence of Shia-Sunni conflict becoming much more, intensifying or anything of that sort.
If we talk about what India has been doing since the conflict has started, or even before the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Israel, yesterday there was a big news because we were tracking that in the newsroom. One US submarine torpedoed one Iran warship, which was returning after participating in a naval exercise in Vizag. And there was a huge outcry. And also Sonia Gandhi has written an article in which she said that India is abdicating its responsibility, and it's not being neutral, but it's abdication of the responsibility. In all these events, like India being silent on the attack on Iran and the assassination of Khomeini, and as well as the Indian Ocean incident, why India being silent and why India acting like this?
It's a serious matter, actually. The Indian government, in a way, abdicating its responsibility to condemn the unilateral attack on a country like Iran, which has friendly relationship with India. When the sovereignty of a country is, broken by a war that the United States and Israel initiated, usually you see countries, especially countries from the global south, coming up and condemning that when such an event happens in the global south context. But this has not been happening with India. The factors we all know: the slow but steady shift in India's policy towards the region, its own close ties with Israel. And you know that the Indian Prime Minister visited Israel just before the start of the war. The exponential kind of growth in the relationship between India and Israel, and the kind of delinking that was done between India's own traditional relationship with Palestine and its growing relationship with Israel, that kind of decoupling that was happening for some time now. So all these shows a gradual shift in India's position. So at least in principle, the question of national sovereignty should have been held as an important element. That did not happen. And above and beyond that was the killing of the head of a state, the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which was again not condemned at all. You see, this is important because Iran and India considers each other as friendly nations. They always talk about civilizational linkage that they have and trade they have and so on. But it was affected in a big manner by the American sanctions. India's own investment in Shah Baghar, that $120 million agreement that India signed in 2025, because of the window of sanction waiver that the United States allowed at that point of time. After Trump's tariff war and so on and so forth, that waiver was removed. So now it's almost of the abdication of the Chabahar project altogether in practical terms, not technically, but that's the result of all those. So along those lines, India was importing Iranian oil in a big manner earlier. Iran was the second largest supplier of oil to India at one point of time. Now, officially, that has gone to zero. And that was what was happening because India, in a way, do not want to risk the sanction regime that the United States has imposed. But China still continues to import oil from Iran, and countries do that. But India has not been doing. So there is that kind of, on the one hand, the slow reduction in the fuller engagement with Iran from India's part, and exponential increase in the engagement with Israel on the other hand. And there has been tremendous progress with the relationship between India and the Gulf countries, particularly UAE, as you know. UAE is the most important trade partner as far as India is concerned. So Israel, the Gulf monarchies, everything together, that is where the Iranian side becomes less of a preoccupation for New Delhi.
In a conversation, you had mentioned earlier that there are two strands of ideologies in Iran's ruling establishment. Could you please elaborate what are the strands, and will that, if there is a friction, will that affect in the entire conflict which is happening right now?
Much of that ideological conflict in the Islamic Republic was happening between what was called, usually the Western media calls it hardliners on the one hand, and the reformists on the other. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was representing that hardliner for analysts from outside. Internally, many people consider him as a pragmatic also, but he's much more conservative along that Ayatollah Khomeini tradition, as you could see. So the reformists have been channeling much of the criticism of the Islamic Republic from the people on questions of individual freedom, on questions of women's rights, on on questions of price rise and many other things. So you had Khatami's leadership. Now the current president, Masoud Pezeshkian, is a reformist. But he's surviving within Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's own supreme leadership, isn't it? So you could see both the so-called hardliners and the reformists coexisting in the Islamic Republic's political system. Because the system is a complex entity in Iran. It's not a person dominated as the Americans and the Israelis think. They think that if the supreme leader, the person is removed from the scene, the system will collapse, isn't it? It doesn't happen like that because the Islamic Republic over the last 47 years or so have built a fairly complex system of sharing of power and other things, even though the supreme leader is the most significant figure who wields tremendous power and so on. But there is the procedure in the constitution itself for the transition. If the supreme leader dies or any eventuality of the kind that they are facing now, there is the three-member council that should be formed according to the constitution. The president, the chief justice, and a senior clergy. They've already formed that council, Many reports say that they have already decided the assembly of experts, which has to choose the supreme leader. The assembly of experts are also elected for an 8-year term. So they are entrusted with electing a new supreme leader. So there are reports that a new supreme leader is found, and reports about Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's own son, Mujtaba, is nominated to that position. We are not absolutely sure yet. So, but that process is on. That's the most important thing. So, to your question, the ideological division obviously is there. When the Green Movement happened on the presidential election, the controversy, it was basically the movement initiated by the reformists. They were participants in the Mahsa Amini movement. They were participants in the recent uprising that you have seen in Iran and so on and so forth. So, but they are also part of the system. And there is, a tension between different sections of Iranian society and the Islamic Republic as an institution. There are big questions, which came out through several of these movements, and in a big manner from last December onwards. So it is not that there are no criticism of the system, etc. There are tremendous criticisms of the system. But that doesn't mean that the system is a monolith concentrated in one person, etc. It's a diverse system. Different ideologies are playing different roles in different institutions, like that of the president from the reformists, while the religious section, there are many, Khatami, etc., came from the religious establishment. So there are reformists from within the religious establishment itself. For example, Ayatollah Khomeini's grandson, who was also considered for the supreme leadership, is a liberal in Iranian politics. He's a reformist. Ayatollah Khomeini's grandson. So there are people like that from within the clergy itself who are, not in one side of the equation itself. The point is that it's a complex system. Diverse interests and ideas exist within that system, and their confrontation is also important.
So you have lived in Iran. You have close connections there, and you have lived experiences of how Iranians respond to crisis. And the war is going on, and both US and Israel carpet bombing Tehran and many other areas. In your observation, how the Iranian society must be responding to this? And in addition to that, with the current stockpile, how long Iran will sustain in this conflict?
Yeah, just yesterday evening, I tried to contact one of my colleagues in the university, and they were describing the dire situation that is happening because of this carpet bombing, as you said. And she told me that they are destroying our country through this, conduct of this war from the United States and Israel. So, people's lives in cities like Tehran is really affected by the war. And because cities like Tehran are huge, and there's no way that all these people can shift to some other place. No place is safe. As you know, you've seen the attack on the girls' school initially, so even schools are not safe. Hospitals are not spared and things like that. So it's a very serious situation, and people's lives are affected. And for Iranians, they are affected by the American sanctions. They are affected by huge inflation. They are affected by the economic condition. And now they are affected by this war. So my heart goes to the Iranian people who are actually facing real crisis now. And that's very, very significant to note. But the American and the Israeli expectation is that when they remove the top leadership, that will be the time when the people will rise up and they can have their own puppet governments established in Iran, the regime change idea. Yeah, that will not be that easy. Because even from the response I got yesterday, I told you that, even while they are suffering, they said these people are destroying, the external forces are destroying our country. So even for people who are critical of the government, when it comes to an attack on your nation, there are other sentiments that also work, isn't it? Yeah. This is not to say that the Iranian system is, it can withstand all kinds of pressures and forces. No, that's not the idea. But it's not as simple as many people believe it to be. There are questions of legitimacy and other things coming up in Iran. But the imposition of a pro-Israeli, pro-US government from above, will that be welcomed by the Iranian people? I doubt.
Before the war, there was a major question of the Palestinian question. Clubbing both these ideas that the Iran is going to survive and also the Palestinian question, how it will turn out in your observation?
For the short term, Iran can withstand the attacks. It is militarily powerful to that extent, even though its own military buildup was affected by the sanctions in a big manner. But it still has staying power for some more time. So Iran considers this attack as a kind of existential question as far as Iran is concerned. So they will be using all what they have in resisting these attacks. And therefore they are willing to go to any extent possible. So that does not mean that is a limitless kind of possibility, not at all. The resources are limited, but they are fighting from their own country. Unlike the United States, which comes from outside, it's depending upon its own allies and the bases in the region, etc. So the Americans, if this war continues for some more time, will face a dearth of their own munitions because, there is a limited supply of that. They bought a lot of time by continuing the negotiations, as if the negotiations between Iran and the US under Omani mediation will yield some results. They were not waiting for any of that, we know. So that was a time when they could make preparations for, moving ships to the Gulf and the Indian Ocean region, and so on and so forth, and have more stockpiles in their bases, etc. But there is a limit to that as well. Okay, it's not only Iran that will face that risk, even though there's no comparison between the military strength of the United States and that of Iran. But since the US is fighting the war far away from the US, that kind of supply problems will come if the war continues for a long period of time. Israel has also utilized a whole lot of it in the June war last year. And so this will also be a big test. You know that Israel is being bombed by Iran continuously over the last several days now, like what Iran is facing from the United States and Israel. So that's also going on. So it seems to be, for the time being, you have the possibility of it continuing unless the United States in particular, tell something that what do you want to achieve? What is the end point? President Trump was pushing the American forces to Iran without any exit strategy, as we know. So nobody knows, even the American military people do not know what is the end game. Where can we stop?
Yes.
So that's the biggest kind of problem
Yes.
that you have. For the time being, most of the sides can continue for some more, short period.
Yeah.
Then we will see what happens.
So it was Professor AK Ramakrishnan who was talking to us. Thank you very much, Professor Ramakrishnan, for participating in this timeline conversation. It was very insightful.
Thank you.